Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 203, Santos versus... I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing ahead of UFC Vegas 50?
Man, I'm doing pretty good. I'm looking at the card. For a fight night, I think we have some... I think it's been deeper than what we've had recently, being that... some of the co-main events we've had recently has been like really bad. We get some fights that matter in the rankings.
All right, before you name any individual fights, I'm going to ask you a question. If somebody told you are only allowed to watch one fight off of this whole card, all 14 fights, you're only allowed to watch one of them.
Tough.
Two questions. Which one is it? And why is it Alex Pereira versus Bruno Silva?
That was my answer. So, yeah, you got this pure aggressive power guy in Silva versus this decorated kickboxer who's actually holds, combat sports wins over the rating champion who looks unbeatable himself. That's why, like, out of every single person on this card, other than maybe the main event, it has the most possible title implications. But there's some good ones. I mean, we just had Rick Glenn get taken off the card, and he got replaced by Terrence McKinney, who I think that's more intriguing matchup now. So I know I cheated. I give you the second one.
That's I probably should have asked you which the second one was going to be anyway. You mentioned something about closeness to a title shot. Something that I have found us kind of falling into over the last couple of previews we've done, and I'm starting to want to do it on purpose, is ask myself and ask you, of everybody on the card, who was closest to a title shot going into this? Because by the time people watch this show, UFC 272 will already have taken place. As it is, you and I are recording it the day before 272. But going into that, obviously, we talked about Masvidal and Covington really being nowhere near another shot at Kamaru Usman for the obvious reasons. And of everybody on that card, again, before the fights take place, I would say Marina Rodriguez might be the closest person to a title shot.
Yeah, she definitely is. If she wins, her next fight could be for the title.
Sure.
So I would agree that's probably the closest, with Ankalaev Santos winner being probably close second. I mean, the main event is usually going to be the closest.
Usually.
There's a reason why they're in the main event. Obviously, the female fighters doesn't get the same shine. Flyweights don't get the same shine as some of the other weight classes, especially the heavier weight classes. The only other one that I can think of, and it more has to do with who the champion is, it really could be Pereira and Silva could be a lot closer, because obviously there is a built-in story if Pereira wins a couple more. But also, when the champion, as he said, is starting to lap the competition, you're looking for new blood. So that's why I think this is for a fight night. This is a pretty solid fight night. Like, up and down, there's a couple good prospects. There's some fights that they're gonna be fun, even though they might not matter to the rankings. Couple newcomers that are coming in, like AJ Fletcher.
Three undefeated fighters on this card.
Yeah, like this is for a fight night. This is a really good one on paper, in my opinion.
I agree, and again, it's a 14-fight card, so they're throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall. Obviously, at least some of it's going to stick. But I'm with you. There aren't a whole lot of stinkers on here. And impressively, for a 14-fight card, there are no obvious pink slip derbies. Honestly, the person on this entire card that might be in the most trouble with the loss is in the main event. Like, if Marlon Moraes loses 5 out of 6 fights, he might actually be in trouble. But south of that,
former title challenger,
yeah.
I mean, it's a good card. You talk about top to bottom, it's hard to pick a lot of these fights. I think it's one thing I say about the UFC matchmakers lately. A lot of their matchups are very close in skill set between guys. Not often we have guys that I feel so confident making a pick. My only concern about this card is when you follow up a UFC pay-per-view, it's a big one and it gets a lot of eyeballs, and you get the casual fans coming in, and you get the whatever the hell that press conference was, and ceremonial weigh-ins and embeddeds and countdowns and trailers and all this stuff. You can get a little bit of a hangover. I feel like the fights that the pay-per-views leading up, the week before a pay-per-view is better than the week after a pay-per-view.
I think that's
Does it make sense? You get a little burnt out.
It makes
we don't
perfect
get
sense.
burnt out, but
Well,
most people.
Well, we show up even if we are. But no, I think you're absolutely right. Living down here in Texas, all I ever get are big pay-per-views that I cover in person.
Sure.
And the week after one of those is always kind of a weird feeling to me. And if I were someone who didn't do this professionally, I didn't have just the assembly line, the conveyor belt coming at me right away, I'd skip a lot of those.
Yeah,
next week cards. Anyone who skips this one, I agree with you. They're missing out on some good stuff. They're missing out on a couple of very likely bangers of fights. They're missing a possible look at a couple of serious future contenders. You pointed out there are some good debuting fighters in this card. Again, 3 of whom are undefeated, and undefeated against pretty solid competition in some cases. These aren't people just coming up with completely inflated records. Unless you have any other general thoughts on the card, how about we dive right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
First up on the UFC Vegas 50 prelims is a light heavyweight matchup between Tafon Nchukwi and the debuting Azamat Murzakanov. Nchukwi, the 27-year-old Cameroonian, is 6-1 overall. He is 2-1 in the UFC since joining out of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. However, he is just 1-0 at light heavyweight. He fought on the Contender Series at middleweight, then won against Jamie Pickett and lost to Jun-Yong Park, again, both at middleweight, then moved up to light heavyweight and took a unanimous decision over Mike Slow Rodriguez at UFC Fight Night Smith versus Spann last September. He will be taking on Murzakanov. The 35-year-old Russian by way of New Jersey is a perfect 10-0 overall. This, again, will be his UFC debut. He won on Dana White's Contender Series last August, knocking out Matthias Scheffel in just 3 minutes back in August. Prior to that, he'd been a standout for Brave CF, which, of course, has become quite the pipeline of talent, especially Russian and CIS talent to the UFC over the last couple of years. The odds on this one are fairly close, but Murzakanov is currently out there around -145, where you can get Nchukwi at +125. Keith, I'm going to throw this one over to you for your pick, but I'm interested, along with your pick, whether you think the move up to 205 was a good one for Nchukwi.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's a smaller guy.
A shorter guy, anyway.
Shorter guy, yeah. He's a very William Knight type build, a former opponent of his, where they're shorter, but very bare chest, big barrel chested guys, big muscles on muscles. So he's even short for middleweight, so no matter what, he's gonna struggle with size, but at least now he's not draining his body on a weight cut. So I think that might be a little bit better for him. I think he's naturally going to have big hurdles no matter what he does based on his physique. It's just not really a physique built for MMA. That said, I kind of skipped over this. This is exactly what I'm talking about this card. Not the 2 most talented guys in the division, but they're starting the card off right away with 2 guys that can end the fight with one single blow, start the card off with a beautiful knockout. So you got to like that. So you got to tune in early and we could get something really exciting. And Nchukwi, as you mentioned, is short for the weight class, but he's very physically strong. He's very athletic. He's got crushing power in both of his hands. He likes to brawl. He likes to throw hard haymakers. He'll toss in, even though he's like a brawler, he loves some spinning attacks. For a short guy, he surprisingly has a quick high kick, which usually kind of goes against all logic. An absolute brute when he gets in close quarters. Good at overpowering his opponent in the clinch, pressing him against the cage, landing big shots. Does well to frame and unload just power shots. He showed some improved offensive wrestling skills in his last fight against Mike Rodriguez. I think he got 3 takedowns against Mike Rodriguez. He's given up a lot of takedowns himself so far in the UFC, which I don't like. I'm also not sure about his cardio. He looked really gassed out in the Jamie Pickett fight, but in fairness, he looked much better in the Mike Rodriguez fight. Move over to the newcomer, Murzakanov. you can't get too excited. I mean, he looks great on film. Obviously, the Contender Series couldn't have been better, but he's also 35 years old. So it's really hard to get behind a guy who's 35. I mean, this is the point where a lot of guys are exiting the sport, not making the UFC debut. But what you like to see out of him, southpaw, he kind of has a very slow, dull you to sleep, and then suddenly bounce in, light on his feet, bounce into range, and unload powerful shots. Really crushing power in both of his hands. I mean, he's got 10 wins, 7 of them are first-round knockouts. He tends to throw every single thing into single shots, loads up big time, almost whips his shots. So he's looking to knock it out with one punch. Like, that's what he's looking to do on the feet. But I like that he will sneak in a takedown. He does have one submission win in his career, which you'd like to be a little bit better at this point. But it's hard to get submissions if you're knocking guys out in the first round. So as far as prediction, I think both guys are a little bit unknown, which is surprising being that one of the guys is 35. But I think we know more about Nchukwi at this point. But both guys have the power to end the fight in a flash. I think Murzakanov has the speed advantage. So, I'm just going to go with the newcomer. I think he's going to be the one that land the first big shot. I think he's a little bit faster. I say he lands the first shot. It's going to be in the very first round. I'm going to say he's going to make a good debut, and we're going to get this card off with a bang. So give me Murzakanov by first round knockout.
Great. I have a lot of the same questions you do. Quite a few unknowns about these guys. Nchukwi obviously only has 7 MMA fights, period. A lot of those were quick finishes. Murzakanov, same problem. He only has 10 fights. You mentioned that 7 of those are first-round finishes, and most of those are like 90 seconds or less. His fight on the Contender Series, it was over in like 3 minutes. I think that was the longest of his first-round finishes. So he fights like a guy who's parked in the fire lane. And one thing I like that you pointed out is that he is not just capable of going for a takedown, but has shown himself willing to do so. And I think that's something that stands out here as well, where if this thing doesn't end in a highlight reel knockout in the first round and these guys are going into the second, we don't know a whole lot about either of their gas tanks, but Murzakanov's ability and willingness to go for a takedown might end up being a tipping point here. As you pointed out, Nchukwi's takedown defense is not impregnable. I'm with you here. It wouldn't surprise me if Nchukwi knocks out Murzakanov in 45 seconds. Both these guys are capable of that, but I'm going to lean with Murzakanov as the slightly naturally bigger guy. And give me Murzakanov by second round KO. But again, any outcome here pretty much wouldn't surprise me. Next up on the UFC Fight Night 203 prelims is a bantamweight matchup between Kris Moutinho and Guido Cannetti. Moutinho, the 29-year-old Milford, Massachusetts native, is 9-5 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC last July on short notice and taking on Sean O'Malley. That fight ended up in a third-round TKO loss for Moutinho and a shortlister for worst beatdown of 2021. It was just an absolute pillar-to-post shellacking in which, depending on what point of view you took to that fight, you were either criticizing O'Malley for not being able to finish it, you were criticizing Herb Dean for not stopping it, you were criticizing Moutinho's corner for not stopping it. Nobody was happy with that fight, apparently, except that Moutinho does get another chance here, and it's going to take place against Cannetti. Cannetti, 42-year-old Argentinian, is 8-6 overall. He is 2-4 in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight losing streak, those coming against Marlon Vera, Dana Batgeri, and Leomana Martinez. The most recent of those, the Martinez fight, was a split decision loss at UFC on ESPN, Barboza versus Chikadze last August. Cannetti, again, only 14 fights despite being 42 years old. He's had a number of lengthy injury layoffs. He's actually been in the UFC since 2014 and only has 7 fights in that entire time. So he is averaging less than a fight per year, but this will be his second fight in about 8 or 9 months. So he's finally found his good health in his early 40s. All of us can only be so lucky. Odds on this one, fairly close, but Moutinho is a slight favorite. He is -140, Cannetti +120. Keith, does the Jorge Rivera disciple, the fighting pride of Milford, Does he get it done in his sophomore outing in the UFC?
Yeah, I know he started with Jorge Rivera. I think he's with Triforce now with Pete Jeffrey and those guys.
I'll have to make a note to change that in the Sherdog Fight Finder.
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, I think New England, they bounce around so much, but I know he's been training him and what's the other guy's name? The other Richie Santiago. I think they've been training with Triforce with the Jeffrey brothers, and maybe Greg Rebello might be cornering him a little bit. I'm not sure. It seems like Greg Rebello has been really blossoming as a cornerman lately. Moutinho. So he's a southpaw he's light on his feet. He's pretty elusive. Uses lateral movement pretty good. As we saw in the O'Malley fight, high output. He's a pressure striker who's going to keep coming forward, but he has no power. He would just kind of charge forward without any setups, without any feints. Really easy just to pick apart as he's moving forward. He'll throw a lot of kicks. He'll throw a lot of naked kicks. He lit himself open to counters. But he showed an insane chin and insane toughness against Sean O'Malley. He really doesn't know what defense is. He keeps his chin high in the air, no head movement. But if he can get inside, he can get to the clinch. He isn't bad in there. He's a little taller for the weight class, uses frame, lands some elbows. He will look to wrestle, even though I wouldn't call him a good wrestler. Like, I think he was like a high school wrestler, but like not even like an accomplished high school wrestler. His entry is kind of weak. He'll kind of just dive in. He's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, you go back to like the Tony Gravely fight. Tony Gravely was a D1 wrestler, and Tony Gravely was taking him down. And this is the way they are on the regional scene, taking him down over and over and over again. But he's an okay grappler. I'll give him that. He'll lose position in scrambles, but he'll keep the fight going. He'll get these weird, just one of these guys just kind of scrappy that like weird position is going to follow him, like kind of like a Tim Elliott style. But he's also going to go hard for 15 minutes at 100 miles per hour. Now, move on to Cannetti. Like you said, 42 years old. His speed has slowed. He's not very explosive anymore. But things I do like him that we've seen, and I'm using seen in relative terms, as you mentioned, he's been in the UFC for 8 years and he's got 7 fights. But he's very aggressive. He's a tight inside striking guy. What I mean by this, like everything's coming straight down the pipe. He can invite a brawl. His left hook is probably his best strike. He's got good power. I mean, go back to the Marlon Vera fight, which wasn't that far ago. He caught Marlon Vera with some pretty good shots or hurt him. Good kicks to the body. I like that he'll mix in takedowns from either the clinch or from distance, but I'm really worried about his chin. He was hurt several times in the Marlon Vera fight. He was knocked out by Denai Bakkarel recently. Though the only thing that's built a little bit of confidence and trust in him is in his last fight. I think his last fight was Mano Martinez. He made it. Mano Martinez, who's known to be a big power hitter, he made it to the distance with Mano Martinez. So you got to like that. Now, prediction. I have never been very high on Kris Moutinho. Like, I never viewed him as the UFC talent. That said, this is the best possible matchup for him. If he's ever going to win a fight in the UFC, Guido Cannetti is the guy that he can beat. Add in that Cannetti is 42. He could just crumble due to his age and wear and tear on his body at any time. However, despite all that, I'm still taking Cannetti anyways. I just think he's the better fighter. He has some defensive skills, and he can wrestle a little bit. I think he's probably the better wrestler. I think it's going to be a war. Like, I'm not very high on this. Like, to me, I think these are the two lowest of the barrel, bottom of the barrel guys in the UFC. But it's going to be an action fight that's going to be fun. So, like, they could win fight of the night. Give me Cannetti in a war. Give me Cannetti by decision.
Oh, you faked me out there. I thought you were going to go with Moutinho because I don't have many hard and fast rules for picking fights. I'm just not that systematic a guy. But if I had one, it would be don't pick a 42-year-old bantamweight. But
your rule is don't pick Guido Cannetti.
And I'm glad you mentioned the Martinez fight because last August, going into that fight, especially given that Cannetti's chin had shown some issues, and again, he was coming off another almost 1.5 year layoff. It's like he's already in decline and he could go completely over a cliff. any day now. And given a guy with the power that Martinez has, I picked Martinez by first round knockout, and I felt more confident about that than any other fight on that card. And Cannetti looked pretty good. You pointed out that, he is a compact inside striker, but he made that work against a guy in Martinez that he prefers to be an out striker and snipe people from range, but he frustrated Martinez. Martinez came in like 5 pounds heavy for that fight, but nonetheless, Cannetti's gas was fine. He was the guy pushing the issue in the third round, gave Martinez a hell of a fight. It makes me feel better about him going into this fight. And I'm with you. I'm not super confident in either guy. And Cannetti in particular, I don't know how many fights he has left on his contract, but if he loses this fight, it's his 4th straight loss, and he's 42 years old. I mean, he might just get cut and then retire. I have no idea where his head is at. But I'm with you. I think he's got enough to get past Moutinho. I'm just, as cool of a story as it was to see Moutinho get his chance in the UFC, because we said ahead of his debut, he wasn't even the best bantamweight in CES. Like, it was a real just perfect timing thing that he got to step up and do this. And this is probably his best chance of getting a win against anyone currently on the roster. But I don't think it happens. I think Cannetti is going to win a fight that's almost entirely conducted on the feet, should be a lot of fun, and it could be that kind of fight that deserves fight of the night, but gets buried in the 12 more fights between this one and the main event, and some other fight gets it. But give me Cannetti by decision as well. Next up at UFC Vegas 50 is a middleweight matchup between Dalcha Lungiambula and Cody Brundage. Lungiambula, the 34-year-old South African, is 11-3 overall. He is 2-2 in the UFC since joining as a standout of EFC, the major promotion in Southern Africa. He is 1-1 at middleweight. He fought at light heavyweight in his first 2 fights, splitting 2 fights with Daquan Townsend and Magomed Ankalaev, who appears in the main event tonight, and then dropped down to middleweight, where he beat Marcus Perez, then dropped a decision to Marc-Andre Barriault. That most recent fight, the Barriault loss, was at UFC Fight Night, Brunson versus Till last September. He will be taking on Brundage, the 27-year-old Michigan native, fighting out of Factory X, is 6-2 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He competed on season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series, lost to William Knight, and incidentally, a couple of people on this card have fought William Knight. In fact, have both these guys fought William Knight? No, okay, only Brundage has. He lost to William Knight, went back, won another fight in LFA, then got the call up to fight Nick Maximov at UFC 266 last September. He dropped a unanimous decision there, so this will be his second chance to get his first win in the octagon. And he is just the slightest of underdogs in that pursuit. He is even money right now, plus 100. Lungiambula, minus 120. Keith, who you got in this one? And I mean, I asked you the opposite question of this about Tafon and Nchukwi just a couple fights ago. How do you feel about Dalcha, another guy of that same general just overbuilt build, going in the other direction and dropping to middleweight?
I don't like it at all. I think he should stay where he was. I don't think cutting weight is going to solve his skill. I think anything is going to drain him even more. I mean, he was already big for the weight class it is. Dropping down I don't think it's going to make him much bigger. He's a guy who just relies on raw striking skills. Like, he's explosive. He's got huge power. He makes a mistake of looking for single blows. He tends to load up on every shot. But this tires him out. I mean, you go back to he was very gassed against Ankalaev. Marcus Perez was a fight that he was gassing out in. He tires himself out, limits his output, puts him in bad positions to win. I like some of his defensive skills, but also hate some of his defensive skills. He does well to parry punches, good hand fighting, but he makes a mistake of backing just straight up on the center line, which I don't like. He's a very physically strong guy. Again, does that change moving down in weight? But this is his first fight down, right? He didn't, right?
No, he fought Marc-Andre Barriault at 185. He fought Marcus Perez at 185. Those are both at 185.
Right, so I'm way off. Okay.
No,
Yeah. So,
no,
so
he fought
scratch out the UFC.
Dequan Townsend and Magomed Ankalaev were both at 205.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. 'Cause I was sitting Marcus Perez. I'm like, did Marcus Perez move up? Yeah. That whole weight thing screwed me up. But he's a very physically strong guy, especially in the clinch. He's a judo black belt. He was a national team member. Good trips, good throws. I think his takedown defense is pretty solid. But if you take him down, he struggles to get off the bottom, and it kind of goes with what I've said about judo altogether. It's much different than wrestling. It's when you have to understand judo. Once you hit the ground, you have a very short time to get a submission, and they stand you back up. Where wrestling, you have to work your way. You just keep from not getting pinned. And obviously jiu-jitsu, you're on your back for a long period of time grappling. It's why judo guys, I don't think are as good at getting up. Now, they're good at getting quick submissions off their back, but like working their way back up, I think hurts them. Now, Mr. Amanda Bobby Cooper, limited striker, throws he throws like the lead uppercut a lot, which I hate. But he's got good power in his hands. He does load up a little bit, not to the extent that Lungiambula does, but he tries to end the fight with one single blow. Throws kicks everywhere, like lots of kicks. Surprising for a wrestler to be throwing as many kicks as he does. He even likes the question mark kick, something he likes to snap behind his opponent's defense. He's a good wrestler, former NCAA wrestler, good top control, strong takedown defense. Though, in fairness, Nick Maximoff out-wrestled him. He also took the fight out. I believe Brundage took it on short notice. This is a tough call, as I think both guys are pretty raw. Neither guy are very high-level UFC talent. I'm going to go with Brundage, though. I haven't seen him gas out like I've seen Lungiambula gassed out. Plus, and maybe it's just a natural bias of mine, I tend to lean wrestling over judo almost always. So I'll take Brundage. I'll take him by close decision.
All right, that's going to be the second fight in a row where I am right with you in picking the slight underdog here. And I think I feel even more comfortable about it than you do. I agree that Maximov out-wrestled Brundage for large stretches of their fight, but I thought Brundage in general acquitted himself pretty well, considering just kind of how highly touted Maximov's credentials were coming into that fight. And I thought Brundage won the fight. Like, I actually scored that fight.
I'm high on Maximov.
Yeah, I'm high on Maximov as well, but I scored that fight for Brundage. And I think he will be able to get Lungiambula down if he wants. Like, the first round is the most dangerous round for Brundage for sure here. I mean, either guy could knock the other out in the first round. They both throw really hard. Both have defensive lapses. But I think after the first round, it becomes a much more friendly matchup to Brundage. And for somewhat the same reason that I said with Azamat Murzakanov and Tafon and Nchukwi further down the card, Brundage has the option to try to take this to the ground. And while Lungiambula's takedown defense isn't terrible, it's better than Nchukwi's. You pointed out that he does tend to get tired, and one of the first things to go when you're tired is your ability to sprawl, get your hips out and away from the other guy. And, I could see, there being a wild first round. Both guys look a little tired at the end of the first round, but Brundage has better functional cardio in the second and beyond, and maybe Alexa take this thing down to the ground. Give me Brundage, and I'm going to say give me Brundage by third round TKO on the ground. We head now to the flyweight division for a matchup between two young up-and-comers in Sabina Mazo and Miranda Maverick. Mazo, the 24-year-old Colombian by way of Southern California, is 9-3 overall. She is even 3-3 in the UFC. She is on a 2-fight losing streak, those being a unanimous decision loss to Alexis Davis last February, and most recently, a third-round submission loss to Maria Agapova at UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Rodriguez last October. She is taking on Maverick, the 24-year-old Missouri native by way of Virginia, I believe it is, or it might be the other way around. At any rate, she is 9-4 overall. She is 2-2 in the UFC, and she is on a 2-fight losing streak as well. She started off her UFC run with wins over Liana Jojua and Gillian Robertson. Since then, she has dropped decision losses to Macy Barber last July and Erin Blanchfield, who won a unanimous decision over Maverick at UFC 269 last December. Maverick is a substantial favorite here. She is minus 275. Mazo plus 225 as the underdog. I see this fight. Basically, this is a fight between two women that, left to their own devices, will probably keep this thing standing. I think they're both kickboxers by preference, but beyond that basic similarity, you couldn't get much more different. Mazo is super long for the weight class and likes to fight long. She pre-UFC level, like on the, South American regional scene and an LFA, she was a big head kick fanatic. That has not carried over so much as she started running into women who could take her down and make her pay for doing that. But nonetheless, she likes to throw kicks. She likes long, straight punches, and just prefers to fight at her distance. She's one of the long, willowy strikers who she doesn't have an infighting game yet that at least that I've seen that works against UFC level flyweights. Then there's Maverick, who also, she's more willing to take things to the ground, but also would prefer to be a striker. But she is short, she is compact, and because of that, she has to use movement and feints and bounce into range to get into range to land her kicks and punches on people. In a fight like that, something has to give, and I think it's going to be Mazo. Maverick is strong. She's explosive. She's shown herself able to get into range against taller fighters and land her offense, and I think she's going to do that to Mazo. Give me Maverick by decision. This should be a pretty fun fight, but I see Maverick just bouncing into range, landing punches, countering Mazo's kicks with punches, probably running her, getting the clinch, running her to the fence, and just kneeing and banging her up there. But give me Maverick in a pretty clear-cut decision.
Yeah, this is a fight that if you a couple of years ago, if you told me they were going to fight each other, I thought it'd be much higher up on the card. But as you mentioned, they're both in really tough situations. The good thing I like about these is they're both still very young. I know Maverick's 24.
Both 24.
Yeah. Oh, so they're both 24. I thought Mazo might be a little older, but
Mazo, yeah. She's 9-3, but her professional debut was literally the day after her 18th birthday. Like, she's been doing this since she was basically a high schooler. So.
Yeah, they both really need wins bad. You mentioned Maverick's southpaw Muay Thai type striker. She uses movement well. She understands distance well. She can dart in and out of range really quickly. High output. She attacks with combos. She does well at keeping her space with that Holly Holmes side push kick. Good in the clinch. She's a very physically imposing young lady. She's absolutely ripped. Especially when you see the weigh-in photos on Instagram and stuff. In close, she looks for she's got a mean streak on her. She looks for slicing elbows. Go back to the Jojua fight where she just busted her up with an elbow. I think she's a good wrestler. Good timing on her entries. Good top control. Likes to go to Dagestani handcuff, keep you down that way. Brutal ground and pound. Good back takes. Has 4 submission wins. Though sometimes I say she chases submissions that isn't there. The biggest issue of her game is probably her defensive wrestling. She showed in the past that she could win some scrambles against a good wrestler like Gillian Robertson, but she was absolutely decimated on the ground by Erin Blanchfield. So she's somewhere in between those two, which is actually probably not that bad.
Yeah.
Is a crown. One thing I'll say this: we will all complain about her loss to Macy Barber. Most people thought she should have won that one. However, we shouldn't ignore that she put herself in that position to lose because she faded late, which is a concern. Mazo, again, 24, so she has room for improvement, but also really needs a win. High volume striker. You mentioned how long and lengthy she is, as a 70-inch reach. I'd say she has plus power, but she has some defensive flaw, especially she moves her head straight back, kind of has a tall woman's defense. Her long legs could be her best weapon because, she just throws kicks, can keep her distance with teep kicks, especially she has a really fast high kick. But those long legs could also be huge targets for being kicked out, and she showed that she doesn't check leg kicks. Go back to Justina Kish, who a fight against Justina Kish. Really, Kish as an opponent hasn't aged well. And Kish had some success by kicking her legs out. She did show a lot of dexterity, though, in her hips, that she can get her kicks up really fast without much tell signs. I'd say she's an underrated wrestler. Better wrestler than I'd credit her. You go back to like the Shayna Dobson fight. She got 4 takedowns on Shayna Dobson. Though she needs to improve her own takedown defense. Marina Moroz took her down. I think her and Justin Kidd, I think both took her down. And then Alexis Davis took her down three times. By the way, surprising. I don't know if you saw it, but Alexis Davis got cut by the UFC. That was someone who's doing pretty well. A little surprised by that. Or they didn't renew her. I don't think she was cut. I know they didn't renew her contract. But anyways, back to this. I am worried about her submission defense though, as she was submitted in her last fight. But she's got good cardio. She can press a good pace. So as far as prediction goes, I'm not crazy about this matchup because I felt like both fighters had some pretty big upside heading into the UFC, but have struggled. And the loser might be buried at only 24. Like the loser of this fight is gonna have a really uphill climb. But I'm with you. I'm leaning Maverick too. She's stronger. I see her landing the takedown, either controlling on top or catching like one of Mazo's kicks once she's on top, controlling, landing heavy shots. Give me Maverick to finish it late. I'm gonna see Maverick gets a 3rd round TKO from ground and pound.
There you go. 2 picks for Miranda Maverick to be the one who gets things back on track at UFC Vegas 50. Next up on the UFC Fight Night 203 prelims, featherweights take the cage as it is Damon Jackson versus Kamuela Kirk. Jackson, the 33-year-old Oklahoma native by way of Dallas, Fortis MMA product, is 19-4-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-1-1 with 1 no contest across 2 separate stints with the UFC. He is 2-1 in his most recent run in the UFC, those being a submission win over Mirsad Bektic, a first-round knockout loss to Ilia Topuria, and most recently, last October, a unanimous decision win over Charles Rosa at UFC Fight Night Dern versus Rodriguez. He will be taking on Kirk. The 27-year-old Hawaiian by way of Arizona is 12-4 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as a veteran of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series, though he was not signed off of that performance because he got knocked out by Billy Quarantillo. Went back to LFA, won a couple fights, and made his debut against Makwan Amirkhani last June at UFC Fight Night Rosenstrike versus Sakai, where he won a unanimous decision. The odds are fairly close on this one, but Kirk is a -150 favorite. Jackson is a +130 underdog. Keith, who do you like in this one, and how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, this is again tough. As we talked about the card before it started. Hyped up some fights. This is one of the other ones that I'm not too high on the winner. Like it could be fun, especially Damon Jackson can be a really fun, entertaining fighter. But the winner moving forward, I'm not going to feel too good at. Jackson, he's high output, long and lengthy guy. He does well to keep his distance with his long range strikes. Throws a lot of hard kicks, though often he throws naked kicks, leaving him open to counters. He also keeps his chin high in the air. He's been knocked out several times. I don't know several, but he's been knocked. I remember him being knocked out in the past before it. He is a former NCAA wrestler. He will look for like reactionary doubles. If you try to pressure him, he'll drop down. His wrestling looked really on point against Charles Rosa. He got 6 takedowns against Charles Rosa, though. In the past, for a guy who's a former NCAA wrestler, he's been taken down pretty easy himself. I mean, go back to like the Mirsad Bektic fight. Mirsad Bektic took him out 7 times in that fight. He also make the mistake. He'll like jump on guillotines, really attacks those head submissions. To his credit, he does have a good guillotine. He also has some other slick submissions. But when I think of Damon Jackson, I think of a guy just beats people with his cardio, and that's what he did to Mirsad Bektic. I think he took the fight on 3 days' notice and still showed how deep his gas tank was. Move over to Kirk. What I like about Kirk is he's a finisher. He's got 11 wins, 10 come by stoppage. You gotta like that. Though for a guy who finishes fights, he's not that aggressive on the feet. In fact, he can be kind of gun shy at times. But he makes up for it with some serious pop. And even though he has his raw power, he's just basic boxer. He more of a kicker than a puncher. I've said that before. A lot of kicks from striking range, kicks to all parts of the body, deep kicks. He doesn't really check leg kicks. He wants to be all the way out or all the way in. He doesn't mind like a clinch battle where he can land some dirty boxing. Likes trips inside the clinch. He will shoot on the hips. More also like Jackson, a reactionary double kind of guy. Does really well when you're pressuring back to drop down underneath something. Good ground and pound. He's a very good grappler. He's competed in some pretty good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitions and done well in them. He can get submissions from all positions, but his takedown defense is terrible. We said that before his last fight, and it looked even worse against Makwan Americani, who took him down 5 times. And cardio is a little bit of an issue. He slowed down late in fights. Prediction: this is one of the hardest fights on the entire card to pick. I mean, Kirk is the more talented fighter. However, I think he's exactly the kind of fighter that Damian Jackson can pull an upset victory on, because Kirk can fight at low output, and Jackson's not going to do that. Jackson's going to have a good output. He's going to give him an opportunity to win. Kirk tends to slow down as the fight drags on, and Jackson is a builder. He's going to get stronger as the fight goes on. And lastly, Kirk is a weak defensive wrestler, and Jackson can get takedowns. So I might regret this pick afterwards, but right now I'm going to take another upset. I'm going to take Damian Jackson by decision.
I can absolutely see this fight playing out exactly the way you described there. The thing about Jackson is, yeah, he is the less athletic, less talented fighter with less upside. But I mean, he is 2-1-1 in the UFC, and he has been the less talented, less athletic guy in all of those fights. And
you know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Julian Erosa. They have a similar build, similar style, similar ceiling, but then they just win fights that
same hairline. They both got
same hairline. Yeah, they're separated at birth.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that, and I would say that Erosa is a little there tends to be more fireworks when Erosa wins, where Jackson, honestly, I know there's 2 guys in the UFC nicknamed the Leech, but really that nickname is the perfect nickname for Jackson, because I think the one thing I would add to your breakdown of his skills is that he is a good back taker on the ground, and he doesn't give it up easily, and he's kind of a rear naked choke specialist. Yeah,
that's a good point.
And he's good at doing that to people that are tired out from 2 rounds of dealing with Damon Jackson. So I can absolutely see this going that way. In fact, I mean, the ways that Kirk wins this fight are probably either he socks away 2 rounds before cardio starts to tell on him, and then he survives the 3rd, or he finds Jackson's chin in the air early and knocks him out. Jackson is a super live dog. You pointed out this is one of the hardest fights on this card to pick. I am going to go the other way. Give me Kirk to win this one, and I'm going to say he gets it done by decision. Just Jackson probably spends the whole 3rd round or most of the 3rd round on Kirk's back and just, working him over. And the only question is it a 10-8 round and we're looking at a draw, or, does Kirk, having won the first 2 rounds, is that enough for him? And that's also assuming that he throws enough volume to win the first 2 rounds. And now I'm talking myself out of picking him. Shit.
I don't know. You got me confused. I thought you would take it Jackson. So now you're taking Kirk. Now you're thinking Jackson.
I've been flipping back and forth on this one for a week, and I thought I was picking Kirk when you finished talking and I started talking, and I just talked myself into picking Jackson. Give me Jackson by decision as well. We now head to the bantamweight division for a matchup between Trevin Jones and Javid Basharat. Jones, the 31-year-old New Orleans-born, Guam-raised bantamweight, is 13-7 with 1 no contest overall. He is 1-1 with 1 no contest in the UFC. And the only thing you can say about this guy is that when Trevin Jones steps into the octagon, apparently something strange is going to happen during or after the fight, because his first fight was a 2nd round TKO of Timur Valiev, where he had been getting shellacked and then just knocked him out of nowhere, only to have it overturned because he tested positive for cannabis. He had been stepping up on short notice. That takes a couple weeks to get out of your system. However you feel about cannabis, just keep in mind that the actual in-cage product was a come-from-behind victory. He then beat Mario Bautista by second round knockout at UFC 259. And most recently, at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Gastelum last August, he was probably about 40 seconds away from winning a fight over Said Yakub Kakramanov when he got choked all the way to sleep with a guillotine choke. So, yeah, don't walk away from your TV when Trevin Jones is fighting. He will be welcoming to the UFC Basharat, the Afghanistani-born fighter out of London, is 26 years old. He is a perfect 11-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He won his way into the UFC by absolutely thrashing Aron Kalon at on Dana White's Contender Series last October. Just ran him over for 2 rounds, then choked him out with a mounted guillotine late in the third. Odds on this one, yet again, pretty close. Jones minus 150, Basharat plus 130. Keith, 2 pretty interesting prospects in the bantamweight division. What kind of ceiling do you see for these guys, and who do you see winning this one?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this is one of the best fights on the card, and you mentioned the odds. I think you said Jones is a slight favorite.
Yeah, minus 150.
Yeah. Oh, actually, a little bigger than I thought it would be. Yeah, that's a really good fight, especially you talked about how good of a performance Basharat had. I mean, it was a pillar-to-post performance. He pitched an absolute shutout in that fight. And Trevin Jones, like you said, like even though he lost his last fight, he looked good before that. Jones, southpaw, really crisp striker, fast hands. He's a counter striker. He likes to counter with a nice check right hook and a clean straight left. His counter right was what put Timur Valiev out. A lot of people thought the Valiev fight was a fluke. I thought it was a fluke, and then he followed up with a really big knockout. I think it was Mario Bautista next.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was a really good knockout right after that. So he's shown he has some serious raw power, which you like. Some technical things I wish he'd clean up, like he drops his hands. He also doesn't like being pressured. He likes being the one coming, like he's a counter striker. But some hard kicks, though he didn't really check leg kicks. He was hurt to the body by Valiev, which you don't like. But some really good timing on his takedowns. Nice entries, fast entries, drives through his hips. He has 4 submission wins. And really, going back to the Valiev fight, I know I've been kind of hopping on that one because that's kind of what introduced himself to the world. He showed incredible heart and fortitude to find a way to be completely outmatched and find a way to win. Now, Basharat, 26 years old, all his wins by stoppage. Really crisp striker, very relaxed, very composed, much different than Jones. Jones is very more a explosive, fast, raw guy. Basharat is more of a technician. Good vision. He's got a very Muay Thai style. Can fight and does like to fight at both stances. I love that he attacks mid combination, switching combos, give different angles. Really nice snap on his shots. Got a crisp jab. Good at getting past his opponent's first line of defense by winning hand battles. He likes to grab the hands, move them out of the way, to land other shots. Hard calf kicks. He does well to check leg kicks. While I just said all these wonderful things about his offensive striking, for a guy who's so technically sound, he still makes the mistake of backing up straight on the sound line. I wish he would cut angles. The way he cut angles on coming in offensively, I wish he would kind of laterally move a little bit more on the defensive side. He also stands up straight, and he drops his hands, which I don't like. Will get a takedown. He's not this great like offensive wrestler. He's going to drive through. He's more going to catch a kick or just shoot in and try to get a scramble going. More of a grappler than a wrestler. But once he's on top, smother and top control, he advances position on the ground, hard ground and pound. He's got 6 submission wins. The one thing I'm really worried about is his cardio, being that he has all these stoppages. He hasn't gone, the full 15 minutes. But to his credit, he got a late submission in the 3rd round of his last fight, and he wasn't slowing down at all, which is a good sign. Prediction, you mentioned this is a tough matchup. I like both of these guys. Moving forward. Basharat is the more polished fighter at this point, and he's exactly the type of striker I like. I think he's going to avoid the power shots from Jones. I think the later the fight goes on, I think the more it's going to favor him. I think he's going to avoid. He's going to have to avoid the power shot as Jones because he has just earth-shattering power. But I think he's going to avoid him. I think he's going to piece him apart from the outside. I think he might be the better wrestler. I'm not really sure who's the better wrestler yet. I think that we'll find that out on Saturday. But I know he's the better, or at least I think he's the better grappler. So give me Basharat. I think he's gonna land some good shots. I think he's gonna catch a submission. Obviously, he does in the third round. So give me him in a. I guess I thought he was gonna be the favorite, but in a slight upset pick.
Okay, well, 6 fights into this card, we finally do diverge on a pick here, and I'm so tempted to pick Basharat for all the reasons you mentioned. He's looked fantastic on the way up. He looked fantastic on the Contender Series, but my concern here is that he is taking a huge step up in competition. Jones will be by far the best fighter he has fought, whereas the opposite is not necessarily true. Like Jones has fought in 3 fights in the UFC. He's fought 3 guys that absolutely belong there and 2 that arguably have higher upside than he does.
Yeah.
Whereas Basharat, he looked great against Aron Colón, but Colón was 41 years old, hadn't fought in 2 years, and frankly, his record was a little inflated due to Israeli MMA weirdness that would be a whole other show by itself. But I can see Basharat stepping up and just being the more sophisticated striker than Jones and having the wrestling and grappling advantage. I do love that you pointed out that he's at least as much of a kind of resourceful grappler as he is a pure wrestler. Because while he grounded Aron Colón in all 3 rounds and just completely mauled him on the ground, at least in the second round and maybe in the third as well, what he did was he forced a clinch, took his back standing, and then hauled him down. It wasn't just a, shoot a single from outside and run the pipe. I could see him doing those things to Jones, but I suspect that Basharat, even if he has the higher ceiling than Jones, he's going to have that shocking thing where it's kind of like merging into freeway traffic. Like he might be a faster car than Jones, but getting onto the on-ramp, his first experience with a guy that's, again, this is his 4th UFC fight. It's going to be a little bit of a shock for him.
That's good. I like that analogy.
Yeah, the merging it onto the freeway. And if Jones beats him, I think what he's going to do is he's just going to lamp him. So I'm picking Jones by first round knockout here. And it's not because I think Jones is 10 times better than Basharat, but just because I do think he's going to win. And if he does, that's probably the most likely way he does it. So give me 4 minutes of a fun fight and Jones just catching Basharat with something nice on the feet and putting him down. Basharat by first round knockout, or Jones by first round knockout. Next up at UFC Vegas 50, we head back to the flyweight division, and it is J.J. Aldrich versus Gillian Robertson. Aldrich, the 29-year-old Colorado native, or fighter out of Colorado, is 10-4 overall. She is 6-3 since joining the UFC out of the 23rd season of The Ultimate Fighter. She's on a 2-fight winning streak. Those 2, both decision wins over Courtney Casey last March and Vanessa Demopoulos, whom she beat at UFC on ESPN Barboza versus Chikadze in August. She'll be taking on Robertson, the 26-year-old Canadian by way of Florida, is 10-6 overall. She is 7-4 since joining the UFC out of the 26th season of The Ultimate Fighter. She won her last outing. It was a buzzer-beating, foul-plagued first round submission of Priscilla Cachoeira at UFC 269 in December. If you remember that fight, she choked Cachoeira out with 1 second left in the round. And after Cachoeira had gouged her eyes blatantly twice trying to escape the hold, Cachoeira made her return to action a week or 2 ago. Now her victim is back as well. But that win allowed Robertson to put the brakes on a 2-fight skid against Taila Santos and Miranda Maverick. This is yet another fight on this undercard that is fairly close on the odds. Robertson is -150, Aldrich +120. Keith, 2 flyweights, both coming off at least 1 win, looking for some momentum in a division that might be the most starved division in the entire UFC for fresh title challengers, except maybe men's middleweight. Who gets it done and who takes one more step towards the Valentina Shevchenko wood chipper?
Yeah, well, these fighters might take a step closer to Valentina Shevchenko, but I don't think they're even in the radar of the champion anytime soon. Gillian Robertson, unathletic. I've been saying for a long time that I was giving her a pass as she's still young in the sport when it comes to striking. That time her grace period over. I'm just willing to categorize her as a bad striker. Huge defensive holes, lacks head movement, has no power, throws arm punches. To her credit, she's got a okay kicking game, but she more uses her kicks just to like follow him into the pocket where she can kind of shoot her shots. I'd say good, but not great entries. She can be very desperate to get the fight to the ground, try to get it there any way possible, catch a kick, just dive in. She pull guard. I mean, she tried like flying submissions. I think it was against Talia Santos. She threw up like a flying armbar. And it's funny because I don't think she's even that good on her back. She's much better on the top side. She's a good top side grappler, smothering top control, really emphasizes position over submission, doesn't rush the submission, got some good back takes. She has, I think she has 6 or 7 submission wins in her career, which you gotta like. If she's put on her back, she will look for submissions and work, and she couldn't get a submission on her back. But what I don't like about her, if you put her on her back, she really plays BJJ. She doesn't like try to get back up to her feet. And that goes back to she's so uncomfortable. She'd rather be in a disadvantaged position because somehow she's more comfortable getting hit in the face than she does standing up. And no defensive wrestling. And I think a lot of that no defensive wrestling goes with she wants to get to the ground, fight to the ground anyway, so why fight it? Aldrich, southpaw, counter striker, light on the feet, does well to circle and move. I like that. Really good at having her opponents like chase her and pull her into her punches. I'd say she's a solid boxer. Like that's what I would consider her. Fast hands, though she can be a little trigger shy at times, throwing one strike, kind of point striking to a victory. Her straight left is good, but she tends to be a little bit headhunter. I like for her to go down to the midsection. I like to throw some kicks, both kind of lacking. She also lacks power. Like I said, she's a point fighter. She was overpowered in the clinch against Sabina Mazo and battered in there. That's something where maybe Gillian Robertson might try to just get to the clinch and do some work on her. Even though I call her a boxer, I'd say she's a decent offensive wrestler. She can get some takedowns. She's also a strong defensive wrestler. It's probably one of her strengths. She showed that she could out wrestle people who try to take her. And she could also like win fights with her wrestling, which even though that's like plan B, like against Courtney Casey, and she was going for takedowns, which was really smart if you fight Courtney Casey. And then we've seen her be able to stuff takedowns, go back to like the Vanessa Demopoulos fight, someone who wants to get the fight to the ground. She did that. So Gillian Robertson is the much better wrestler than Vanessa Demopoulos. She's a much not a better grappler, but MMA like submission threat in the UFC. Aldrich showed that she can perform a brawl game plan, and she's going to have to do that again against Gillian Robertson, and it's going to be much, much harder against Gillian Robertson. I'm really torn on this fight. And when the fight was first announced, I instantly said Gillian Robertson's going to win this fight. But the more I think about it, I'm going to say that JJ Aldrich does it again. I'm going to say that she stops enough takedowns to win 2 out of the 3 rounds with her boxing. Give me Aldrich. I think this is my 5th upset pick. Give me Aldrich by very tight decision win. And I think that's going to make her 3 wins in a row if she wins. So Aldrich an upset.
That will, in fact, make it 3 in a row for Aldrich. And I am with you once again here. You have picked 5 upsets and 7 fights so far. I'm not quite as bold as you are, but for me, this will be 4 and 7. And for the reasons you mentioned, I had to adjust my thinking on JJ Aldrich within, I'd say, about the last 2 years, because I had been stuck on the idea that she just isn't very physically strong by the standards of flyweight.
Which still could be true.
It still could be true, but it was based on things like her getting bullied in the clinch by Mazo, by her getting bodied by Macy Barber, and her very early her first loss to Jamie Moyle. But that, I mean, she certainly isn't like the strongest 125er in the division, but I don't think she's like minus in that department anymore. And you pointed out that she's a pretty good defensive wrestler. I think Robertson is going to have a hard time getting this fight to the ground on the terms she wants, because again, like you said, Robertson is too comfortable from her back and not enough of a threat there. Like she's not going to be able to win rounds from her back. and she's not going to be able to win rounds in the stand-up. So her best routes to victory in this fight all pretty much involve Aldrich making a mistake or not fighting to her best advantage. And I'm not going to pick that to happen. I probably see this fight about like you do. Aldrich winning a fairly entertaining sprawl and brawl affair where maybe Robertson manages to get the fight to the ground in 1 out of the 3 rounds, or if she does, it is by something like, pulling guard or, just kind of hauling her down and trying to force a scramble, but ending up on her back and in a position where Aldrich can either just get up or can actually win the round there. So give me Aldrich by decision as well. The UFC Fight Night 203 prelims power on with a welterweight matchup between Matthew Semelsberger and AJ Fletcher. Semelsberger, the 29-year-old Maryland native, is 9-3 overall. He's 3-1 in the UFC. He won his last outing. It was a 15-second knockout of the severely overmatched Martin Sano at UFC 266 last September. If you recall that one, that was the fight where Nick Diaz faced Robbie Lawler, and Sano more or less made it onto the card apparently as a favor to Diaz. It wasn't much of a favor because, again, it was just a brutal 15-second knockout. That allowed Semelsberger to get back on track after his first UFC loss, which was a unanimous decision against Chaos Williams at UFC on ESPN Korean Zombie versus Ige last June. Semelsberger will be welcoming to the UFC Fletcher. The 25-year-old Louisiana native is a perfect 9-0 overall. This will be his debut in the UFC. He won his way onto roster with a first-round flying knee knockout of Leonardo Damiani at on Dana White's Contender Series Season 5 back last August. Odds on this one favor Semelsberger pretty heavily. He is -255, Fletcher +205 as the underdog. I have a little bit of first-hand experience regarding AJ Fletcher. I was present for his second professional fight back in August of 2019. It was Fury Fighting Championship, which is a promotion out of Houston, which now is putting on events in several states. But I went across the border to Lake Charles, Louisiana to see their first show outside of Texas. And Fletcher was in the main event. He took on David Armas, who's a local guy from Houston, a bit of a journeyman by record, but a good test of up-and-coming prospects. And Fletcher won handily over Armas. I don't remember the official scorecards, but there was at least one 10-8 round there. Just complete domination. The funny part of this is Texas's athletic regulation for MMA is pretty poor. Like it's even for people who love Texas and love MMA like me, there's plenty to criticize there. And I didn't realize how lucky we had it until I went to a show in Louisiana, because Fletcher takes on Armas in the main event, and maybe 5 or 10 minutes after the main event is over, just people are filing out, and I go over to talk to Eric Garcia, the CEO of Fury Fighting Championship, just to get a couple quotes from him about how their debut show outside of Texas went. David Armas, the guy who lost the main event, walks up. He has a broken hand. Like, it's not a full compound fracture, but like, the back of the hand, one of the carpals is just sticking up. Nice. Like there's a little tent, like you can tell the knuckle's been pushed back and there's like a serious fracture there.
Nice.
This is 5 minutes, certainly no more than 10 minutes after the main event ended. The doctor is gone.
Gone. He got his check and he's out of there.
He got his check. I guess he had like a tea time in the morning.
Yeah. They paid him the 10 o'clock and I'm on it.
So I'm pretty sure that Garcia drove Armas to the hospital himself.
You know what? Let's just imagine that he's some really big hotshot doctor and he just got beeped in for some emergency brain surgery or something like that. I'm sure that's what happened.
Dude, if you got beeped in for anything, it was probably to like deliver a calf or a sheep or something. That dude might have been a vet for all I know. But that's my Louisiana story. Anyway, Fletcher is a guy that I made it a point to talk to him and get some pictures and some quotes from him, even just in his second professional fight. And he must have been like 22 or 23 at the time, just because he's a guy that in terms of raw physical talent, I saw immediate UFC upside in him. Having said that, I'm surprised to see him here this early. and I don't know that it's to his best advantage because, now 7 more fights on, 2.5 years on, he's really just a slightly evolved version of the very same fighter. He is an early 2000s style wrestle boxer. One thing that, I don't know how much you've seen of him, Keith, but one thing that you'll love is he has a for real blast double. Like, you don't see many people do in MMA anymore. Like back in the early 2000s, you'd see guys that shot the blast double. Sean Shirk shot the blast double. Obviously, Matt Hughes, had a great double. Cain Velasquez was one of the last guys. Yeah, Koscheck. Before Koscheck discovered his overhand right, Koscheck had maybe the best blast double in the sport. Just his athleticism, the fact that it was his best weapon in college. Fletcher's got that. This man will shoot through your hips like an NFL free safety and put you on your ass, 10 feet across the cage. He's got that, but his boxing is still fairly basic, and it's just really based on that wrestler overhand. He throws everything really hard, and he's still. I think he's only been past the second round or past the first round twice in his entire career. So there's certainly question as to whether his gas tank will hold up, because he's not that tall for a welterweight, but he is bricked out. I don't know what his weight cut looks like, but I bet it's substantial because he is an imposing guy face to face. And I just don't think he's ready for Semelsberger. Like, he may well belong on UFC roster, even if, again, I wish it were a year and 3 or 4 more fights from now. But Semelsberger is going to be a tough call, because Fletcher's not going to be able to just wade in and lamp him with an overhand right, because if that were possible, Semelsberger's loss to Chaos Williams would have looked a lot different. And I don't think Fletcher's going to be able to take him down as effortlessly as he has guys on the regional scene either. I expect that Semelsberger is going to be able to fight in that middle to out range where he can use his reach. I don't know if he has the same pure power in a vacuum as Fletcher, who loads up on everything, but Semelsberger has a lot of natural power, and I expect he's just going to knock Fletcher out in the first round. Fletcher's going to have to come forward. He's going to be at a reach disadvantage. He's going to need to at least threaten with his wrestling to really set up his more limited striking arsenal, and I think Semelsberger is just going to torch him. Give me Matthew Semelsberger by first round knockout here.
All right. Yeah. So, yeah, I think your breakdown was really solid in skill sets. Obviously, I know much more about Semelsberger than I do AJ Fletcher. But Semelsberger, I mean, he's fast, he's explosive, he's athletic. He has that just raw striking skills, talent, just that God-given abilities in him. He has a very boxing style, high guard boxing style, good output, fast hands, nice snap on his shots. I love his counter right hand. I like that he goes down to the body. You talked about his last knockout. I love the Jason Witt knockout he had. Showed some power in that one. But does make the mistake of still backing up on the center line, which seems to be a bit of a theme tonight at my breakdowns. He's an underrated wrestler. He hasn't shown too much in the grappling sense. I mean, last time we really seen him grappling heavy, go back to like the Carlton Minus fight, and that's when he got takedowns, but he kind of struggled to keep Minus down. I also don't like that he slowed down in that fight, and he slowed down in the Conor Worthy fight. Those are some disturbing things. Now Fletcher, it's funny, from what I've seen, we look like we've got the same breakdown on this guy. 25 years old, exciting, athletic. He's a shorter guy for the weight class, but absolutely jacked up. He likes to fight out of both stances. He uses feints well, and he throws everything he has into shot. You mentioned single shots. He's trying to end the fight with one big shot. He likes to stand back out of the range, and then just spring forward into the range and throw one big overhand, as you mentioned. He'll throw in some fun stuff like spinning attacks. He had that flying knee knockout on the Contender Series, which is fun. But he also makes a mistake of backing up on the ceiling. But in his sense, it kind of works because he's such a physically strong guy, but you also mentioned he's at fast entries. A reactionary guy, pressure him. I mean, he showed it on the Contender Series. You pressure him, he's going to drop down on the hips. And he's got 4 submission wins. I got some question marks in his cardio and being a little smaller for the weight class. I think I'm not as confident as you are because it's always hard to take an unknown when a guy looks good on a regional scene. you always have to ask a question: Is he looking really good because of the competition he's facing, or is he just looking really good because he's got the talent? I think both guys rely on like physical gifts more than technique. You mentioned Fletcher is taking a step up. I think he looks like a guy that has the talent. I think he'll, as you mentioned, I think he'll be a long fixture in the UFC. However, Semelsberger is just fast, and he might even hit harder of the two guys. As long as Semelsberger, other than the common Worley where he wouldn't let his hands go enough, if he lets his hands and kicks go, I think he wins. I'm gonna go with you. Like I like this little run of knockouts Semelsberger's on. I'm gonna say same thing. I'm gonna say he lands a big shot early, and we're agreeing a lot with each other. I wrote down Semelsberger with first round KO.
Next up at UFC Vegas 50 is a fight that, at least as the card is constituted a week out from Fight Night, is the main card opener. It is a middleweight matchup between Alex Pereira and Bruno Silva. Pereira, the 34-year-old Brazilian, is 4-1 overall. He's 1-0 in the UFC, made his debut at UFC 268 last November, and knocked out Andreas Michailidis with a flying knee and follow-up punches just 18 seconds into the second round. He is, of course, most famous not for his brief MMA career, but for his decorated kickboxing career that saw him win a Glory World title and go 2-0 against UFC middleweight champ Israel Adesanya, the second of those being a complete flatline out cold knockout. He leveled Adesanya with a left hook in, I want to say it was like 2016 or so. But that obviously has a lot of interest hovering over Pereira as he makes his way through the UFC's middleweight division. Seeking to prevent or at least delay a reunion between Adesanya and Pereira will be Silva, the 32-year-old Brazilian who goes by the nickname Blindado, which means armored, like wearing a suit of armor, which if you've seen the guy's physique is not a surprising nickname at all. He is 22-6 overall. He is 3-0 in the UFC with 3 knockouts, those coming over Wellington Turman, Andrew Sanchez, and most recently at UFC 269 last December, Jordan Wright, whom he put away with punches in about 90 seconds. Odds on this one are, again, fairly close. Pereira minus 150, Silva plus 130. Keith, this is a fight between two guys who collectively account for 26 victories, and I think 23 of the 26 are by knockout. How does this fight go? And who do you think gets it done?
Yeah, so this is my favorite fight on the card, including the main event. Obviously, the winner of this fight is going to create a lot of buzz about themselves, especially if they get a spectacular win. If they starch the other guy, they're going to be the new shiny toy in the middleweight division. Especially because not only is there some big buzz on them already, to get a buzz, get a win and hopefully an impressive win over another guy that had some buzz in a division that is, so bone dry for talent. There's a lot of pressure on these guys. Now, Pereira, you mentioned multi-weight Glory kickboxing champion. You mentioned beat Israel Adesanya twice, won by knockout. Is a very long and lengthy, super athletic, technically sound, precision kickboxer. Speed, perfect combination of speed, power, accuracy. He presses forward. I was watching some film of his left hook just face plants people. As I said that last of the exact words I said again, just a thing of beauty. Powerful kicks. We saw his last thing. He's so athletic with like flying knees and stuff. Strong Muay Thai clinch, beautiful knees up the middle. But obviously, when we talk about a kickboxer with not much of MMA experience, the big scare, the big mystery question is his ground game. I'm still worried about his ground game. We talked about him training with Glover Teixeira, which I love training with a guy like Glover Teixeira, and based on his knowledge and his really just one of the most underrated grapplers in the history of our sport. And he has one loss early in his career by submission. I feel much better that he won his UFC debut. I still don't know anything about his ground yet. Move over to Bruno Silva. I called him this before, and I still believe it. He's your middleweight Francis Ngannou. He doesn't have to land clean, just a grazing shot, and he puts people out. He can fight in both stances, both southpaw and orthodox, and he's got power in both of his hands, just crushing power. He tends to fight in spurts, or jump in the pocket, throws like these looping shots. He's open for counters because he throws from his hips, but he's exciting. He likes flying knees. He lacks head for like such a brutally like punishing guy. He got some major holes defensively. He lacks head. I mean, in his fight against Jordan Wright was piecing up before he got knocked out. Jordan Wright was looking really good. Jordan Wright's not known for his hands, but when Bruno Silva starts rolling, it's a scary thing. He gets in the palm clinch. You go back to like what he did to Alexander Shlemenko. Like Alex Shlemenko, a long-time Bellator middleweight champion. Bruno Silva murdered him in the clinch, brutalized him in the clinch. So the one concern about him, and it's not nearly the same concern as Pereira, is his grappling. Like Wellington Turman and Andrew Sanchez had some success taking him down. He struggled to get back up. But the thing about him, like I said, why I compare him to Francis Ngannou, he only has to land one shot. That's all it takes. So as far as prediction goes, I think Bruno would be much smarter to just go against his instincts and just turn this into a wrestling matchup. Though I haven't seen him much offense wrestling, you have to assume that he's better than a kickboxer in grappling. If he can get the fight to the canvas and get to the canvas soon, he should win. I just don't think he does. I think he goes against his own instincts. I mean, goes against his own better judgment and goes with his instincts. I think he's going to come after Pereira. I think he's going to want to make a statement. I think he's going to throw some bombs at Pereira, and it's going to be scary while he's throwing bombs. But if I see Pereira just sliding out of range, staying calm, and just sniping him, picking shot, pop, 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 stop building as it goes, and then eventually I think he lands one of these big kill shots and puts Santos down. I say it's going to happen early, and everyone's going to be going crazy over Pereira. Give me Pereira by first round TKO.
I love that you point out that we don't know how good Silva's offensive wrestling and offensive grappling are, but his defensive ground game has been an issue. I mean, he was losing to Andrew Sanchez halfway through the third round of that fight. I gave Sanchez the first and the second rounds. And then, as you pointed out, he turned it around on a dime, and once he landed the first hard shot, it was all over. I would be interested to see if he tried to take Pereira down, but even if he decided to, even if that was what they worked on this whole camp, okay, we're going to take this guy down, we're going to shock the world, it's going to be rough sledding because he's going to need to get in and kind of shoot in from outside, because trying to clinch with Pereira and just shove him to the fence is not that's not a safe place for Silva. Silva's good in the clinch. Pereira is lethal in the clinch and bigger. So even if he wants to wrestle here, I think it would be rough sledding for him. But I think you're right. I don't think he's going to try. I think he's at least going to, in his mind, be like, I'm going to see how I do on the feet against this guy that knocked out Israel Adesanya, and I'm going to steal his thunder. And when I knock this dude out, maybe I'll be fast tracked into the title picture. And I think the difference in especially how defensively sound they are will tell really quickly. So I'm with you. Pereira starts piecing him up early and often and gets a first round knockout, probably with that nasty, nasty left hook. Next up on the UFC Fight Night 203 main card is a lightweight matchup between Drew Dober and late notice replacement Terrence McKinney, who steps up just, I believe, 9 days from Fight Night to replace Rick Glenn. Dober, the 33-year-old Nebraska native, is 23-11 with one no contest overall. He is 9-7 with one no contest since joining the UFC. He didn't join the UFC out of the 15th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He was eliminated in the fight-ins to get into the house, but turned up in the UFC shortly thereafter anyway. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, though in fairness to him, those 2 losses are against Islam Makhachev and Brad Riddell, who are a top 10 and top 5 fighter, respectively. The most recent of those, the Riddell fight, was a unanimous decision loss at UFC 263 last June. He had been scheduled to face Glenn. He will now seek to get things turned around against McKinney, who, speaking of turnaround, fought just a week and a half ago at UFC Fight Night Makhachev versus Green. McKinney kind of taken the UFC by storm over the last year or so. 27-year-old Spokane, Washington native is 12-3 overall. He is 2-0 in the UFC. He won his debut at UFC 263 with a record-breaking 7-second knockout of Matt Frivola. That's the fastest finish in UFC lightweight history. He turned things around in February at UFC Fight Night Makhachev versus Green, choking out Fares Zayam in just 2 minutes for his second straight first-round finish to start his UFC career. Dober had been a 2-1 favorite, or over 2-1 favorite over Glenn coming into this fight. Against McKinney, he opened up at -150, McKinney plus 130. So the odds just got much, much closer. And I would argue I'm not going to say more interesting, because I was definitely interested to see the style matchup of Glenn versus Dober. But this is an interesting matchup in its own way. Dober, I've made this joke / observation before, but Dober, to coin a phrase that the great Jordan Breen once used to talk about Nate Marquardt, he looks wrestly. You see this stocky, muscular guy from Nebraska with cauliflower ear, and you're like, oh, dude, I bet he didn't wrestle for like Big Red Nebraska, but he wrestled for like Nebraska Omaha or something. He probably was in the NCAA tournament all 4 years. I know this guy, and that is not Drew Dober. Just the same as, Nate Marquardt, you see the guy from Wyoming with cauliflower ear that's all jacked, and you're like, oh, no.
He's Dober, in Wyoming because he went to a Wyoming seminary, the top high school wrestling school. Yeah.
Yeah. Dober is a kickboxer. He's on good power, aggressive fighter. He's a guy that he's been lurking around the outskirts of the lightweight rankings. It feels like for like 3 or 4 years now, just never quite strings together the right 2 or 3 wins in a row to really break through to the next level, but has he has good wins. Like his back-to-back knockouts of Nasrat Haqparast and Alexander Hernandez, those actually got him like right onto the verge of the top 10. And that's when he ran into Makhachev and Riddell. Now in McKinney, he's taking on somebody that, as we found out a couple weeks ago, when he beat Fares Zayam, he certainly can win on the feet, but he has other avenues to victory as well. It was a revelation to me, like how fast and smooth McKinney was on the ground. And that probably shouldn't surprise me as a guy who, he's at Warrior Camp now, but he was a Sikjitsu guy for the longest time. So a guy that had been working with Michael Chiesa probably as a primary training partner for years. It shouldn't surprise me that he's as good as on the ground as he is, but that's a tough, different look for Dober to have to deal with. On a week and a half notice, facing a guy that might well be able to hurt him on the feet. Like McKinney has super fast hands, good power, but also has the option to take this to the ground. Dober's defensive wrestling has never been great. And once it's there, McKinney is obviously very dangerous. I am going with the slight upset here. My only concern is if this gets through about midway of the second round, what does McKinney's gas tank look like? He fought just weeks ago, and while it was a pretty quick fight, like he didn't have a scratch on him. That means he had a full camp set to peak in late February. He had his full weight cut, then went home, and here he turns around a week later, having to make that weight cut again. Just it does make me wonder about his gas tank, but I'm not sure that we're going to get to the point where we need to find out about it. I think this is going to be kind of a statement win for McKinney. Comes in as a slight underdog, and I think he's going to take out a well-regarded fringe contender in Dober and kind of mark himself as the new, very exciting guy in this division. Give me McKinney by second round TKO, but I wouldn't be terribly surprised if it were a second round submission either.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. What'd you say the odds were?
Dober minus 150, McKinney plus 130.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Like that's what I expected. Yeah, somehow Dober gets a new opponent, and I think it's a much tougher matchup. It's a much more exciting matchup. There's a lot of buzz right now amongst Terrence McKinney. Obviously, two really good performances so far in the UFC. You go on Ariel Helwani's show, which obviously gets you a little buzz. But he's exciting. He's got a 100% finish rate. He's well-rounded, as you mentioned. Southpaw with fast hands, throws big power shots. Prior to his last fight, he was just starching guys in like under a minute. Like every fight, it seemed like. I said this last time. Even in the Ziam fight, even though it was really quick, he tends to overthrow his shots, leave himself open to counters. I mean, he got his like kicked out because he telegraphed a big shot. Obviously, it worked out for him because he got his leg kicked out and he got kicked right into a like a single leg. He tries to KO, the walk off KO every time he throws a punch. I do love his push kicks. He is a junior college All-American wrestler. Lightning fast entries, as you mentioned, really good at turning the corner. So, all right. I think I did this on the recap, but I'm going to do it again. He was a D3 All-American. I think he might have even been a D3 national champion. I'm not sure. He did very well in the wrestling scene. Like Michael Bisping, don't call me an Olympic hopeful. Like he might have went to the Olympic Training Center to get beat up by like Kyle Dake or Thomas Gilman Thomas Gilman would be more of his weight class, or Jordan Oliver or something like that. He's not an Olympic hopeful. Zane Rutherford is a 4-time NCAA finalist. He was a 3-time Division I NCAA champion. He's a 2-time Hodge Trophy winner. For those who don't know what the Hodge Trophy is, that's like your MVP or really like your Heisman Trophy for wrestling. He is obviously way more credentialed than Terrence McKinney. Think about it. 3-time NCAA Division I champion, 2-time Heisman Trophy winner, Hodge Trophy, but I'm calling it the Heisman. And he can't make the Olympic team. Like, stop calling Terrence McKinney an Olympic hopeful. Hopefully they won't say this time, and I won't have to rant on it again. No hate for Terrence McKinney. He was a great wrestler. I like that when he's on the ground, he looks to better position. We saw that in the Zion fight. Really hard ground and pound. Has 7 submission wins. You raised the question mark about his gas tank based on, such a quick turnaround, have to cut weight again, which obviously is all valid questions. I'm worried about his gas tank because he just starches everyone so quick. We haven't seen him have to go deep. I mean, every one of his wins is by stoppage. Move over to Drew Dober. At this point, I feel like we know what we have him. He's a southpaw who's a really good pressure counter-striking kickboxer. Marches forward, does well to draw out opponents' attacks with feints. I love his head movement, very slip and rip style. He hits very hard. He can chase the KO sometimes, though, kind of just throwing so hard instead of just like letting it flow. I have said this before. The reason why he gains so much power, and the best thing about Drew Dober's game is his foot placement. He honestly always lines up his shots with perfect footwork. He keeps his base underneath them, so he's throwing like through his hips, through his ass, landing these shots. I mean, and of course you talk about how like bricked up wrestly he looks. He constantly just like keeps stepping off the center line, like getting his footwork to line up his shots. I love that. This also sets him up for takedowns. And to be taken down. But the one thing, so we saw in his fight against Makhachev, he really struggles to get takedown. But I think that like him being taken down against Makhachev has aged very well. It seems like nobody can stop those takedowns. The one thing about Drew Dober has been lacking is that like sprawl and brawl type defense. Like we talked about JJ Aldrich, that's her avenue to victory. This is a really tough fight. If McKinney came out and said, I'm just going to wrestle, I probably would take him. On the feet, though, Drober is a really tricky guy. We've seen him hurt people. Even like when he lost to Brad Riddell, he almost knocked out Brad Riddell earlier in that fight. I know that everyone is sold on McKinney. Like, I saw people talking this week when, who was it? I can't remember who it was. Rafael Fiziev fell out, and there was people saying they want fights. There was like people's first choice mock draft. Some people were saying like, man, Terrence McKinney should be the next pick. Like he was volunteering to fight RDA, and people were really, really pumping him up. So it seems like everyone's sold on him. I'm not sold on him yet. Like I can be sold. I want to put that out there. Like I'm on the fence with him. I liked him on the Contender Series, but Dober's a big step up. Dober's good. If he starches Dober, I'll believe it. If he out wrestles Dober, I'll believe it. If he just puts on a great performance, wins the decision, I'll believe in him. I want to believe in him, but until he shows me that he can beat someone on Drew Dober's level, I'm going to take Drew Dober. Give me Dober just to win the stand-up battle, land some big power shots, maybe even hurt McKinney a couple times. Give me Dober by decision.
Agree that it's a fight of the night candidate?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. We now head to the light heavyweight division for a striker's delight between Khalil Roundtree and Carl Robertson. Roundtree, the 32-year-old Californian, is 9-5 with 1 no contest overall. He is 5-5 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of the 23rd season of The Ultimate Fighter. He won his last time out, putting Modestas Bukauskas down with a leg kick that caused a fight-ending injury. That was at UFC Fight Night Brunson versus Till last September, and that allowed him to put a 2-fight skid in the rearview mirror. Those were losses to Iwan Kudalaba and Martin Prokhnio. He'll be taking on Robertson. The 31-year-old New Jersey native is 9-4 overall. He is 4-4 since joining the UFC as an alum of the first series of Dana White's Contender Series, and he is on a 2-fight skid. Those are both first-round submission losses coming against Marvin Vettori back in June of 2020 and Brendan Allen, who tapped him out late in the first round with an ankle lock at UFC 261 last April. This is yet another fight that is close on the sports books. It's practically a pick 'em, but Roundtree is -125, Robertson +105. Keith, off the mic, off the camera, you mentioned that you understood why this one is comfortably placed on the main card as it is. How do you see this one playing out, and who takes a step forward in this division?
Yeah, I think the reason why it got put on the main card is there's a good chance that there's a knockout if it stands on the feet. If it goes on the ground, both, especially Roundtree, is weaker there. We can see a stoppage there. But in a weird sense, this is one of the fights, and it's going to be an entertainment, but I'm just so not on either one of these guys that it's one of the fights on the card that I'm least interested in. Now, Roundtree, southpaw, who's light on his feet, moves really well, athletic guy, fast, very explosive, great power, huge power, chopping leg kicks, crushing kicks to the body, into the liver. But he is the worst wrestler in the division. If he's taken down, he really struggles on top. Kutalaba ended up with elbows. Gasses out, obviously, the more he wrestles. And he's never fixed it. And I don't think he's ever going to fix it. He's going to win with fights that guys stand with him. And, he has lost those fights too. But, that's it. If someone starts coming wrestling, Khalil Roundtree is not going to win. Now, Carl Robertson, he's very athletic, southpaw, good movement. I'd say he's a good but not great striker. I think we look at his credentials and expect him to be better than he is, but he's one of the guys whose striking has not really carried over in MMA to the level that we thought it would be. He does have fast hands, has a very slip and rip style, sliding out of the way with head movement, landing, or he likes to parry punches, coming at him, kind of going over the top. Good power, I'd say plus power. He has that K1 kickboxing background, but in MMA, Brandon Allen was having a lot of success on the feet with him. He's got some great leg kicks. He's got some quick high kick. It's funny as we talk about Carl Robertson in striking. I think his striking is overrated. I think his grappling might be underrated. Pretty good at winning scrambles. He does have 4 submission wins. That said, not the best ringing endorsement when he was submitted in his last 2 fights, but Marvin Vettori, he had really fun escape against Marvin Vettori. And Brendan Allen had that heel hook. Those are two really good grapplers. Cardio is a little bit of an issue. He tends to slow down. As far as prediction goes, dude, I legit have no idea who is winning this fight. Like, it's just a terrible fight. Terrible in the rankings, and I would rather have these guys be tests for other like young rising guys. I'm leaning Roundtree on the feet. I'm leaning Robertson on the ground. Screw it. Let me yell at my TV and pick a guy that I said I won't pick anymore. When I'm screwing this pick up. Give me Roundtree to land something in the very first round, win by knockout.
I especially agree with you on the point that I have no idea who's going to win this. It's close to a coin flip on the odds, and I understand why. Both of these guys have plenty of question marks about them. An additional question mark introduced here is that this is Robertson's first fight up at 205. Well, at least first fight up at intentional 205. He missed weight pretty badly against Vittori. Well, okay, he missed weight so badly against Vittori that their first fight was canceled, and Vittori like trashed the hotel lobby. Then the second time they fought, he weighed in at like 191, and lost badly.
This is the same Vittori who took a fight with a guy who showed up in a different weight class. like yeah, we're fighting at 185. No, we're fighting at 205. Like, what do you mean we're fighting at 205?
I guess Vittori got all that anger out of his system.
Yeah,
but
that's it. He turned. He's very. He must have went through counseling or something. Anger management. That's it. And when I think of Marvin Vittori now, I think of a very relaxed, human, very mellow kind of. Does yoga and stuff, and just
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the move up does help his gas tank somewhat. I won't be surprised at all if Roundtree blows him out of his shoes in the first round, or vice versa. Like if Robertson lands something really nice and knocks Roundtree out. But if this goes past the first round, I think the matchup starts to favor Robertson. Neither of these guys has a great gas tank, but Roundtree's is probably worse already, and Robertson will no longer be making that cut. So I'm going to assume that Robertson's gas tank will be much better than Roundtree's here. And while he's been more of an opportunist on the ground than a dedicated wrestler, I think if this goes past the middle of the second round, both these guys tired, hands starting to come down, there are more single strikes being exchanged and more just kind of collisions than like actual footwork. I think this fight's going to end up on the ground somehow sooner than later. And once it's there, like, Robertson has all the advantages. Give me Carl Robertson by second round submission in what, if it goes past 2 minutes, it's probably going to be kind of an ugly fight. So the UFC, I'm sure, is hoping for an early finish, but I don't think that's what we get. Third from the top at UFC Vegas 50 is a featherweight matchup between Sodiq Yusuff and Alex Caceres. Yusuff, the 28-year-old fighting out of Maryland, but the third of three African-born fighters on this card, is 11-2 overall. He is 4-1 since joining the UFC out of season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series, and that one loss was actually in his last outing. He dropped a unanimous decision to Arnold Allen last April at UFC on ABC, Vittori versus Holland. Prior to that, he had opened up his UFC run with 4 straight wins over Suman Mokhtarian, Shayman Moraes, Gabriel Benitez, and Andre Fili. He'll be taking on Caceres. The 33-year-old Floridian is 19-12 with 1 no contest overall. He is 14-10 since joining the UFC out of the 12th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He is currently on a 5-fight winning streak, which is something that I never expected myself to be saying about Alex Caceres in 2022. So whatever happens in this fight, just know that this man has fulfilled and exceeded the measure of his apparent upside when he was, I mean, more of an interesting novelty on Tough than anything. Just this kind of chill Floridian dude who called himself Bruce Leroy and like walked around with the actual Bruce Leroy like afro pick in his hair and was kind of a fun sideshow.
Like a character. Yeah, he's like a fill-in character. Yeah.
But he is on a 5-fight winning streak. And
dude, if you told me he was still, sorry to interrupt you, man. If you told me like 3 or 4 years ago that Alex Caceres was still in the UFC, I would have laughed. I wouldn't expect it.
Not only
good for him. I'm glad he's doing it.
not only is he still in the UFC, but he is now the most accomplished fighter from Tough 12. Like, he's past Michael Johnson at this point. Michael Johnson is like sub 500 in the UFC. Alex Caceres. I mean, there have been a couple of iffy decisions in that run, but almost nobody puts together a 5-fight win streak in the UFC featherweight division without at least a little luck. It's been over Steven Peterson, Chase Hooper, Austin Springer, Kevin Kroom, and most recently, last October, Sung Woo Choi, whom he choked out in the second round at UFC Fight Night, Costa versus Vittori. If the odds makers are to be believed, this is where the fun comes to an end for Bruce Leroy. He is plus 190, where Sadiq Yusuff is minus 235 as the substantial favorite. Keith, does the fun, in fact, come to an end? Does Super Sadiq power on? Who wins this? How do they win it?
Yeah, so I'll do what I normally never do, and I'm going to give my prediction first. It's a nice story. I'd love for him to pull off. Nothing against Sadiq Yusuff, but it's he's a fun character. I'm not buying the 5 wins in a row. I mean, you mentioned the guys' names. It's not Murder Giroux who he's beating. I mean, all 5 guys you mentioned probably wouldn't even be, if we were ranking out, the top 50 guys in the weight class, probably none of them even cracked the top 50, or at least not the top 40. So I'm not buying it. I think Yusuff is more skilled of the two. Caceres, he's a grizzled veteran, southpaw, pretty elusive, good vision, poised. He doesn't really tense up or anything. Nice jab, a lot of kicks. Really, really hard way to grasp his grappling. Kind of a funky style grappler. Just kind of gets the hips moving, always flowing. Good in scrambles. Gets in weird positions because of it. Has half dozen submissions or so in his career. So if you make a mistake, he can snatch on a neck. And he has his career resurgence. I'd love for it to keep going, but when I look at Sadiq Yusuff, long and lengthy striker who's accurate, throws combos, good output, fast hands, an elite jab, really nice snap on his shots. His left hook is really, really sneaky, wraps it around his opponent's hands to land. Good power, some of the very best calf kicks in the entire game. I love his plum clinch, inside knees, good at scrambling. He still struggles to stuff a takedown. That's probably Caceres' best avenue of victory, as Allen exposed him there. And he's been taken down 2 out of the last 5 fights, but he also gets up. He'll work back to his feet. So as far as prediction goes, I just see Yusuff just a better athlete, more explosive, more power, faster, just more technically sound, more skilled. I think he batters Caceres. I like Yusuff in an absolute destructive blowout decision. Caceres is tough, so he'll probably make it to decision, but I think it's going to be a one-sided shellacking. I can see a 30-26. I can see a 30-25 scorecard. Give me Yusuff Salal in an absolute blowout decision.
Yeah, I'm with you here.
I'm sorry, Sadiq Yusuff. I call him Yusuff Salal. It's Sadiq Yusuff. I messed up my Yusuffs. It's late. We're taping. It's 1:30 a.m. We're taping late. Sorry.
It's only 12:30 for me. I've got no excuse for any mistakes
I make.
You're
fresh. That's why you look at it. Not looking as fresh as you did last time. I mean,
I can't do that every time.
Yeah, the recap show. I might have to come out tuxedo or something to try to top that.
Anytime you have a fight like this where one fighter is a substantial favorite, I'll go for the. I'll ask myself, what does it look like if Caceres wins? And if Caceres wins this, it's almost certainly going to be on the ground. Just Yusuff is a better striker in every conceivable way. He's better chin, hits harder, faster, more defensively sound. So it would take Caceres winning it on the ground. And considering that Caceres doesn't have great traditional wrestling entries, it would probably need to happen late if Yusuff were tired. Yusuff is a guy who's got a ton of muscle, a lot of explosive movements, but Yusuff's shown that his gas tank is just fine. At least his gas tank is just fine if he's winning. He's gone the distance several times here, including against guys in Andre Fili that were trying to wrestle him, and his gas tank was fine. So even that little window of opportunity is not much of one for Caceres. So I'm with you here. Caceres will, I mean, he's going to need to try to strike with him on the feet, and he's going to get much the worst of it. I do think he's going to get lit up. I'm not going to pick him to get finished either, just because he is tough. He is a gritty veteran. He's very resourceful. If he does manage to get this to the ground for any stretches of time, even if he's not able to win rounds that way, that's at least a couple minutes that he's not getting his head punched in. But give me Yusuf by a very one-way decision. The co-main event of UFC Fight Night 203 is a bantamweight matchup between two fringe contenders with very, very different momentum, is the way I'll put it. It is Marlon Moraes versus Yadong Song. Moraes, the 33-year-old Brazilian, is 23-9-1 overall. He is an even 5-5 since joining the UFC as the outgoing World Series of Fighting bantamweight champion. He lost his debut to Rafael Assunção in a very narrow decision, then rattled off 4 straight wins against high-level contenders, including Assunção, including Aljamain Sterling, in order to earn a chance to fight for the vacated 135-pound belt. He got knocked out in the 3rd round by Henry Cejudo, and that started what has been largely a downward slide for him. He has, over his last 5 fights, 4 TKO losses and 1 decision win over Jose Aldo that, to put it charitably, was controversial. So it's been a rough 2.5 years or so for Moraes, and he shows up in this co-main event just in time to meet Song, one of the UFC's more intriguing up-and-comers. And it feels weird to say that about a guy this will be his 10th fight in the UFC, but still officially just 24 years of age. Song, 24-year-old from China, is 18-5-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 7-1-1 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight winning streak, those coming over Casey Kenny and Julio Arce, those both since his lone UFC loss, which was a unanimous decision against Kyler Phillips last March. Song is a strong favorite here. He's -250, Moraes +200 as the underdog. Keith, I said it off the top. It's not very common that a co-main event participant is arguably on the chopping block, but again, there's a good reason to think Moraes should really be on a 5-fight losing streak right now, and he's a big underdog here as well. Is there any life left in the 33-year-old? Like, how does this fight go?
Let me ask you this. Are you surprised by the line? Not asking for your pick, but like, are you surprised that the lines are that big?
I'm not, even if I don't agree with it. Just the recent visuals, Moraes has looked so bad recently. He's shown signs of life in his fights, but the ends of his fights look so bad.
Yeah, but still much different like levels of competition.
Yes.
I mean, say what you want about Marlon Moraes. I mean, he's lost to like studs. I mean, I think I scored the fight for him, Marlon Moraes over Jose Aldo. I honestly don't remember. For some reason, I feel like I did. But if I didn't, say Aldo won that, say we gave Aldo his loss would be to Henry Cejudo, one of the greatest fighters of all time, who at that time was a 2-weight champion. Mm-hmm. Jose Aldo, definitely one of the greatest fighters of all time. Corey Sandhagen, who was pretty close to winning a title himself. Rob Font, who's been, a nice stable in the top 10, and then Merab Dvalishvili, who nobody wants to fight.
And he was thrashing Merab.
Yeah. So, he's 33, so you definitely you can't feel a lot of confidence taking a 33-year-old guy who you mentioned lost 4 of his last 5, arguably 5 of his last 5 fights. So you can't, it's tough to have confidence in him. But what we have seen him, he still can fight in both stances. He's still elusive. He works well from space. He's quick. He's explosive. He might have lost his step, but he was still much faster than most people, that he still steps ahead. He's good at attacking in and kind of attacking with quick spurt of offense. Always had good power for the division. He had that crushing left hook. He had that like legendary switch kick, high kick. But the one thing that is always, I think, of Marlon Moraes, I've said this many times, but I must continue to say it's something that I really discovered in the Henry Cejudo fight. He seems like he's a bit of a front runner. When things are going well for him, he's flowing. But when someone kind of holds their ground on him, he fades a little bit. Yeah, he does his best to be the big brother. But if you big brother him back, it's just something he doesn't like being pressured. Henry Cejudo just folded him with his pressure. Jose Aldo, Rob Font, Corey Sandhagen, they all had success with their pressure. Obviously, I mean, that's what Merab does for 15 minutes. So I guess the five guys that you could argue he lost to, other than Jose Aldo, and even Aldo to a sense can pressure with his footwork, just kind of stepping forward, not really his output, but kind of forcing you back a little bit. Those five guys could just be stylistically bad matchups, being guys that like to move forward. But Moraes, he can sneak in and take down. He's pretty good at scrambles. He has a submission threat. But when he's on his back, he likes to play BJJ. He looks looking for submissions. And I'm a little worried about his chin at this point, as he's been in some wars, and some of those fights are like 25 minutes, or the wars 15. Yadong, honestly, you mentioned his age. I didn't even write it down. I like to write down young guys' ages and just to remind myself that, like you mentioned, he's got so many fights in the UFC. I forgot he was so young. He's well-rounded. He's a very poised striker, high output, technically sound boxer, throws accurate straight shots down the pipe. They're really short, not many tells on it. Really nice snap, works behind a crisp jab, follows with combos of power shots. I don't like that he ignores the body. That's like the one offensive thing in his boxing I really wish he'd pick up. And at 24, he's at the age where he can, and that's the best thing about you take notes. I'm an old-fashioned guy. I like to write it in a book. I write in a book, and then I transfer it into a computer anyways. I'm just an old man, so I have to write it down. And I like when my notes of young fighters continue to grow, and things that I wrote down as negatives, I start crossing out that they fixed it. He's at that age where we could see a completely different fighter for the better. But he's got plus power, but again, he's at that age where he's not entering his power age. So we could see a lot more one punch knockouts coming from him. Hard calf kicks can sneak in a takedown. Though he was taken down by Marlon Moraes twice, which I don't like. But he's a good grappler. He's got 3 submission wins, good get-up game, good cardio. I mean, he had a war. I mean, I know a lot of people thought he lost to Marlon Vera, but it was a war, and he didn't slow down. And then his last 2 fights, he looked really good against Casey Kenny, looked even better against Julio Arce. We talked about his power coming in. He's showing that in the Julio Arce fight. At 24, you got to like Song Yadong to continue to improve. I'm picking Song Yadong here. He looks, and I know I just said it like 5 seconds ago. He just looks so good in his last 2 fights against Casey Kenny and Julio Arce. Obviously, I believe that's lower level competition than what Marlon Moraes was at. I'm not sure where he's at now. However, I just think Moraes might be done, and I like Yadong to piece him up, to beat him up, and land some big shots. And I think he might even get a late finish. Give me a real coming out party. Yadong's, I mean, it's probably been a coming out party for a while now, but this is the name to add to the talent we see. Give me Song Yadong by 3rd round TKO.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you put out there, and I was starting to point it out, and then you just kind of swept in and did an even better job of it. Moraes' recent run looks terrible on paper, but he really has shown some signs of life in these fights. I mean, it would not shock me if 2 years from now, Merab is the bantamweight champ, and we're like, man, Moraes was the last guy to even have this guy in trouble.
Let me ask you this. Sorry to interrupt you. Would it surprise you if Moraes turned this around? If he still had like a run in him? I'd be a little bit surprised, but he's got talent.
I don't think he has another title run in him.
Yeah, I don't either.
But you asked me right off the top what I thought about the odds for this. I understand why they are where they
That's
are.
Why I asked.
But yeah. I think he's a much more live dog here than plus 200 would seem to indicate. Because he's a step up in competition for Song. He's a fast starter, and yeah, he's been better than his recent record looks. So, and this is a step back for him. Like, he's been fighting nothing but top 5 guys, including some top 5 all-time guys, for the last couple of years, and now he's fighting, you know, a borderline contender, like a guy kind of on the outer fringes of the top 10.
And if he sorry to interrupt you, and if he wins, he is a contender. If Sundong wins, he is a contender. Welcome to the title picture.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm being extremely rude. I keep cutting it on you. Sorry.
Well, please do. If he wins convincingly, yeah, this is the name he needed to win over, especially if he beats him as badly as the last couple of guys have. Like, this can't look like a beginning of a comeback for Moraes. But if Moraes loses here and the UFC doesn't cut him, they give him yet another step down. Now he's fighting guys that are like 2 fights out of the contender series. There are still bantamweights on this roster that Marlon Moraes can beat. Yeah. There's 10 or 15 bantamweights in the roster that he'd probably knock out in the first round. He's got a long way down the ladder before he gets to face any of those guys. And it's anyone's guess whether, you know, he sticks around that long in the UFC. He is an old 33.
Yeah. He gets cut by the UFC if he loses, and instantly gets picked up by Bellator, and they like replace Leandro Higo in their bantamweight tournament and throw Marlon Moraes in.
I would favor him over almost everybody over there, except maybe like Rafion Stotts and You favor him over Sergio right now?
Oh, I wouldn't favor him. I know.
I wouldn't favor him over Sergio.
Yeah.
But Sergio was losing against Horiguchi until he won.
Yeah. I wouldn't favor him over Horiguchi either.
I wouldn't favor him over
Horiguchi got knocked out, which obviously is always concerning, but Horiguchi's really good. Wrestling of Magomedov too. I mean, I don't know, man. I favor him over James Gallagher. Okay, so I'll give you that. and I'd pick him over Leandro Higo right now.
Yeah.
I'd probably still pick him over Juan Archuleta.
I think he beat Archuleta.
Patty Mix, man, that'd be a good one.
Well, Mix is another one like Pettis, where I like if he fights Sergio Pettis, I bet he's up 2-0 going into the third round, and it's just the question of like, is Pettis gonna like pull something nasty off? You know. Yeah,
we have a side rant. We go, in between the co-main event and the main event, we go into a breakdown of Bellator Grand Prix.
Song Yadong by lopsided decision. Wouldn't be surprised to see like a 10-8, third round here.
Yeah. And before we get to the main event, we're going to preview all of the PFL tournament brackets.
Hey, tonight, the night that we're recording this, Friday, they're sorting out the lightweight division. We get to see who fights Kayla Harrison next.
It was
that's a thing.
I think the fighter with the best record was like 4-3. There was all 0-0 females and I think a couple 2-0s and yeah. Good Lord.
Like, I'm sorry, but considering how bad women's featherweight is, having a women's lightweight division, it would be like the UFC having a men's super heavyweight division. Like, just go find Jimmy Ambrose and Alexandru Lungu.
Yeah. People are gonna be like, "What the hell happened between the co-main event?" Real quick. Screw the UFC in Bellator. How the hell did you possibly not get Kayla Harrison? She was begging to leave the PFL.
She was
like before her last fight in the PFL. She was doing. I mean, she did like a couple of interviews with me, and she was bashing her own company like publicly. How do you not get a deal done with the girl that we talked about? We really talked about who could be like the number 2. Oh, this is what we did. I think we did off air. Like, who could be the number 2 star between Conor McGregor? It could be Kayla Harrison if she went to the UFC. Like, come on, guys, what are you doing? Anyways,
she was cage side at Nunes versus Pena.
Seriously,
threw her hands up in the air and said
on TV. Mm-hmm. How do you not get a fight? I don't know.
It's bad. All right, I'm going to stop recording.
Okay, good.
But like, if you're watching this right now, Keith and I, every time we record one of these, we say, "Wouldn't it be funny if we just left the recording going the whole time?" Like, and still put the timestamps in so you could skip to where we actually talk about the fights, but just all the in-between conversations, just like let it go. Let us know if you want to see that, because we'll do it one of these times.
This is pretty much between every fight, we get sidetracked on completely different topic between every single fight.
Yep. Like, if we spend 3.5 hours doing this, you should get to as well one of these times. So let us know in the comments if you want us to do that, and we'll do it for the next one of these kind of whatever fight nights. That brings us to the main event of UFC Fight Night 203. It is a scheduled 5-round light heavyweight attraction between former title challenger Thiago Santos and up-and-comer Magomed Ankalaev. Santos, the 38-year-old Brazilian, is 22-9 overall. He is 14-8 in the UFC. He is 4-3 in his most recent run at light heavyweight. He did compete primarily at middleweight early on, but he's 4-3 at light heavyweights, and basically won his first 3 fights at light heavyweight over Eric Anders, Jimmy Manuwa, and Jan Blachowicz, which paved his way to a title shot against John Jones. He lost by split decision in a fight that quite a few people thought he won, but, you know, razor close. Lost 2 more against Glover Teixeira and Alexander Rakic. Came back with a win over Johnny Walker last October in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 193. He will attempt to keep the good news coming against Ankalaev. The 29-year-old Dagestani is 15-1. He is 7-1 in the UFC, and that won a loss in his UFC debut with literally 1 second left on the clock against Paul Craig is arguably the only 10-second span of any fight that he has lost in his UFC career. Since the loss to Craig, which was all the way back in March of 2018, so coming up on 4 years now, he has beaten Marcin Prachnio, Klidson Abreu, Dalcha Lungiambula, Iwan Kutalaba twice in a row. You may remember their first fight as one of the dumber finishes. One of the dumber things that I've seen in the octagon in the modern era. Nikita Krylov.
But fits Kutalaba perfectly, though. It doesn't make sense in MMA, but it fits Kutalaba.
It was the most Jan Kutalaba fight ever. Yes. I think he landed more significant strikes at the weigh-ins than he did like in the fight. Anyway, after the back-to-back wins over Kutalaba, he beat Nikita Krylov, and most recently, last October at UFC 267, Volkan Oezdemir, whom he beat by unanimous decision. This is the 14th fight on the card. It is the most lopsided, at least on the books. Ankalaev, a prohibitive -450 favorite. Santos +340 on the comeback here. Keith, I'm going to turn this over to you for your pick first, but is this one of those fights that is a title eliminator for one guy and not the other? Do you think this is all Ankalaev needs is a convincing win?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not so much for Santos if Glover Teixeira loses the title. With Prohaska, it opens a lot more doors than, you know, say what you want about Glover Teixeira. Like, he earned that title shot, like, the long way, beating contender after contender. And Santos was one of the guys on his way there and kind of trashed him. So, I think it matters who wins the light heavyweight title matchup, but in a vacuum, I'd say definitely there's a lot more hanging for Ankalaev. And really, if you think about it, Ankalaev could really get himself a title shot, because the other guys that are in the bubble in the picture, they kind of out of sight, out of mind. Like Rakic is the guy that I think of, and being that he fought first and he's got the main event, it just brings more eyeballs, brings more attention. I mean, if you win, well, the week up, 4 or 5 days before, people are talking about your fight more than anything. 1 or 2 days afterwards, they're talking about you before they start focusing on the next card. So there's probably about, a week where you're the guy. So that matters. And when you have a guy like Rakic, or, if Jan Blachowicz is back in the picture, he's kind of ahead of those guys just based on fighting first. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, timing has a lot to do with these.
Yeah.
And I think the timing does work out in this favor. You mentioned the thing about being when you're the headliner, they've been talking to you all week. You're at the presser. You're kind of up front and center on any like hype reels they do. You're on the poster. I mean, I'm trying to think of a fighter in the modern era who has been closer to a title shot than Magomed Ankalaev that I know less about his personality.
Yeah.
He needs that. He needs that exposure.
Yeah.
Like he has all the personality of an Islam Makhachev. Where, I mean, he says some insightful things if you stick a mic in his face, but he's just not had that many opportunities to do so. He's still just 29. And because he lost his debut, like you and I have talked about the difference in marketability of an unbeaten fighter versus a once beaten fighter. We wouldn't talk about
absolutely.
We wouldn't talk about Khabib the same way if he had like one stupid loss in Outer Mongolia in 2011.
Yeah, if Khabib had the same, I think we would talk about him the same way we talked about like some of the most dominant fighters for short periods of time. I think you've said it before too. Cain Velasquez might be one of the most, in his prime, one of the most dominant fighters I've ever seen. Like pure dominance. I think Khabib would be in that category instead of all-time top 10. You take one fight that he won away from him, turn into a loss, and the people are calling him GOAT and all that. They wouldn't even be in the conversation.
Yeah, it would just be a totally different.
Just a great career. Yeah.
And
what a run. Sucks that he retired early, but what could have been kind of thing. But
and if Ankalaev had been able to hold out for one more second and had just won a unanimous decision over Paul Craig, he probably would have been fast tracked to a title shot by now. In some ways, maybe it's even better for him.
Yeah,
if he holds on for one more second, he wins a 29-28 decision at worst. Maybe still 30-27 because he'd been dominating that round until.
That's right.
Yeah.
I feel like there might have even been like a 10-8 round in there or something. But yeah. It's 1 second. It's one of those ones you just didn't know the time because you could have hung on for one more second.
Yep. It's interesting. What if? But here we are. Who wins this?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No. I was just ready to move on to that unless you had anything else.
Well, I mean, we talk about what ifs. One of the what ifs is what would have happened if Thiago Santos didn't get injured against Jon Jones. I mean, still to this day, I believe he's the only fighter to win a scorecard against Jon Jones. A judge gave him the victory over Jon Jones,
which is interesting because I thought Dominic Reyes came closer to actually beating him than.
So did I. It's one of those like technically things, but yeah, I agree. It's like Gleason Tebow came closer to beating Khabib Nurmagomedov, but he technically didn't win a scorecard. While I think Conor McGregor and I think Justin Gaethje might have won in the first round of their fight, but the Gleason Tebow was much closer to beating. So Santos, he's a bit of like out of sight, out of mind. He was gone for so long with his injuries, came back, lost the glove at the share, which really that loss has aged much better than it did at that time when he lost. The Johnny Walker win has not aged, especially the way it went down, being a little gun shy. But if he puts on a performance, knocks out Ankalaev, does something that he has the talent to do, he'll be right back in the picture because it's a shallow division. Not to the same extent if it's as the reversal. If Ankalaev starches him, there'll be a way, like you mentioned, there'll be way more buzz. Just that new guy in town brings it. Santos is a huge dude. Obviously, he's explosive, hits so hard, has power in both of his hands, can fight out of both stances, which makes it even more, I shouldn't say unique, but just more advantage, bigger advantage for him, being that he can fight out of both stances, to have power in both of his hands. When he's in the southpaw stance, his straight left is deadly, which is surprising because he doesn't have the best technique. He tends to throw from his hips. He has some really hard calf kicks. I mean, he was actually hurting Jon Jones with the calf kicks, but his takedown defense is bad. I mean, you go back to the Glover Teixeira fight. Glover was taken down with these. Again, I know I speak for both me and you. Glover Teixeira is unbelievably underrated in his grappling, his wrestling. He just has a way to get guys to the ground. But Santos is a percentage black belt, but I think we all know that's a little bit of a like participation trophy in his case. Like he kept showing up to practice, and we got 4 guys in our class. We're giving out 3 belts. Yeah, let's not be a jerk. Let's give the other guy a belt too, and just happen to keep showing up on belt day. But what I do like about him is he has the experience to go 5 rounds. He's been in big fights. He's fought hurt. He's had to power through stuff. So he's got a lot of good experience. Move on to Ankalaev. He lacks that experience. He hasn't, been in the major fights. But he's also big for the weight class. He's well-rounded, technically sound. He's a southpaw, busy jab. He needs to tuck his chin in a little bit. I don't like that. But everything else I like about him. Powerful leg kicks. He likes push kicks. He's got a great high kick. Go back to that first fight against Kutalaba. He threw like 12 high kicks and like hit every single one of them in that like 30-second fight. He's very physically strong. He can just muscle his opponents to the fence. He likes being in that position because he's a little taller, so he gets his knees up fairly easily. Uses head control to kind of just frustrate. Then he'll just drop down on the hips, pull him out, smothering top game. Very Dagestani style where he'll just grab an arm, grab something. He also has a little like old school Mark Coleman, Tito Ortiz style, sit in your guard and pin you against the cage, which got him in trouble against Paul Craig, but most people it won't. And it's a good ground and pound and incredibly hard takedown defense. So as far as prediction goes, I like Ankalaev a lot here. He's going to have to avoid the big shots. Even though Santos has the advantage of having 5-round main event experience, I actually think the deeper this fight goes, I actually think it favors Ankalaev. I think every minute that goes around, the less of a chance of Santos landing one of these big shots. He's going to have to avoid the big hooks, the high kicks, especially those ones where Santos has this great ability to suddenly make the cage really small with the way he uses his long legs to step in. But I can see Ankalaev just dancing around, picking him apart while Santos is gun shy, picking him up with a jab, picking him up with a calf kick. When Santos tries to close the distance, tries to land a big thing, Ankalaev's just dropping down, getting takedowns, working on top, wearing him out. I actually think Ankalaev might close the door too. I think he might get a late stoppage. I'm gonna say Ankalaev gets a ground and pound TKO in the 4th round.
I love the breakdown there, and I'm with you all the way here. It is a shame. Santos's knee injury, it put him out for like a year and a half, and he's not been the same since. Like, just he isn't. Like his movement is his movement has not been the same. He's still a dangerous fighter. I mean, clearly he's he's still in there against top 5 guys, and against top 10 to 15 guys like Johnny Walker, he handles them, but there's a difference in him. And it's possible to make adjustments and come back from something like that. I mean, look no further than Shogun Hua. But thing is, Shogun was blowing his knees out when he was like 24, not 34. Here, I think Ankalaev has advantages just about everywhere, and even the things Santos does best. I'm trying to picture the exchange that leads to Santos hurting Ankalaev really bad and being able to pursue and get a finish on the feet, and it's hard for me to envision. I think Ankalaev's takedowns are going to come into play earlier rather than later. I can see him getting takedowns from the clinch against Santos. I could see him actually shooting on Santos. It's a 5-round fight, but I'm not sure it makes it to the main event rounds, actually. I'm seeing Ankalaev finishing this on the ground, either ground and pound or submission in the 2nd or 3rd round. Give me Ankalaev. I'm going to say 3rd round submission here, but this should definitely be a coming out party for him because Santos isn't on that 3-fight losing streak anymore. I mean, he looked good against Johnny Walker. He's proven that, okay, yeah, I'm still like a top 10 quality guy. And Ankalaev is going to show us that he's past that at this point. And from there, it'll just be a matter of whether a title shot is his next time out or he ends up needing to have like some sort of top contenders match against another one of the top 5 guys. I think that's about it, man. 14 fights in, we have done talked about UFC Vegas 50. For those of you still watching, you know, we know a lot of you. Just if you're new, please be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment for us. You know, if you think we're crazy for any of these, please let us know. If we got something factually wrong, definitely let us know. Both Keith and I are good about responding to those. We love the give and take. And speaking of give and take, if this is your first time watching us, you should be aware that we do a live recap right after the main event. So, you know, 10 or 15 minutes after the main event on Saturday, we'll be live on the Sherdog YouTube page. You can go straight there, or you can find the link from sherdog.com, where we'll be breaking down all these fights from the top to the bottom, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was controversial. The live chat is wide open there, so we are talking back and forth with viewers. We're taking your questions. We're taking your comments, your hot takes, your opinions on what should be next for the winners and losers. And certainly if we got any of these wrong, and on a night where I picked 6 upsets and I think Keith picked 5, chances are we're going to be wrong on some of them. By all means, come and give us hell. Between now and then, thank you for watching. Have a great week. Enjoy the fights.
All right, man.